Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the president of the Fund for American Studies, Roger Ream.
Good evening. Hopefully everyone will find a seat. Well, welcome to the 32nd TFAS Journalism Awards dinner. For any newcomers, TFAS stands for the Fund for American Studies. Woo. Tonight is about people I like to think, I actually believe are here with us in spirit. That's Robert Novak, Ken Tomlinson, Tom Phillips, and of course, Joe Rago. Tonight is about honoring those who lived meaningful lives, lives that continue to ripple across the waters today. These individuals touched us in many ways and touched many of us in this room, not only through their great writing and publishing, but also as fathers, sons, brothers, and colleagues. Thank you to all who support the Robert Novak Journalism Fellowships and the Joseph Rago Fellowships for Excellence in Journalism. You are truly making a difference. We have our latest, tonight you'll be meeting our latest class of both Novak and Rago Fellows. They're going to come up here and speak to you very briefly. We give them each a minute or two. But it's such an upbeat, encouraging evening to hear from them because they are the future of journalism. And you'll know that if you look in the program and read about where past Novak and Rago Fellows are today. We are so happy to be honoring two very deserving recipients of our Phillips and Tomlinson Awards for courage and career achievement in the field of journalism. We have two journalists here tonight, reporters really, to be more accurate, who I have such high admiration for and who are both courageous as they bravely go to where the facts lead them and write about it. The Fund for American Studies has an extensive number of programs for young people in lots of fields. Our mission is to develop courageous leaders who are equipped to protect the ideas of individual liberty, personal responsibility, and economic freedom. We don't waver from that mission, which we were set on a path for in 1967 and have stayed true to over the last 58 years. We focus on young people, young professionals, university students, and high school students. Our biggest growth area since 2018, when we partnered with the Wall Street Journal and the Rago family, Paul, Nancy, Adam, and Grace, has been in the field of journalism. New programs have been spawned from that partnership in 2018. So let me give you a very quick overview while you eat your salads of these programs. Our Student Journalism Association is home to more than 500 collegiate journalists and more than 30 independent campus newspapers. We're at every Ivy League school, and we stretch from NYU to Stanford to Wake Forest to others. Our Center for Excellence in Journalism houses our Media Accelerator program for young professional journalists. Our Campus Transparency Project is training campus journalists to be reporters, to report on what's going on their campus. And of course, our Robert Novak and Joseph Rago Fellowships. We have a long-standing, since 1985, Summer Journalism and Communications program in Washington, D.C., where students combine their internships with courses in economics and other fields and are mentored by journalists. Every summer, we organize our annual European Journalism Institute in Prague. Speaking of Prague, I'm pleased we're joined tonight by the Czech Permanent Representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Jakub Kulhanek, an alumnus of one of our Prague programs. Sadly, he told me tonight his 4 years tenure at the UN is coming to an end, so he's not so permanent in any event. Before proceeding further, let me just thank a few of our top sponsors this evening. I'll simply acknowledge them and say thank you, which doesn't do enough to express our gratitude for their support. First of all, the Rago family. We're so grateful to have their support. Steve Klinsky and Kathy Wendells, two very generous supporters of the additional fellowships at the Journal. I'd also like to acknowledge Jerry Orstrom, John and Gigi Dalsheim, Paul Jagot and the Wall Street Journal Opinion, Northern Trust, Mrs. Robert Novak, Geraldine, Melanie Kirkpatrick and Jack David, News Corp and the Wall Street Journal, and Philip Friedman. Thank you all for your support of our work and all the rest of you who support it. You're truly making a difference. To all of you who support our work, thank you. We're accomplishing something that Joe Rago himself recognized as vital. And as he put it, that is not perfection, but working to make things better. He recognized that we each have an obligation to improve important American institutions, including but not limited to journalism. That is what we're doing and precisely what your support enables us to do. Well, without further ado, I'd like to ask Matthew Taylor King, our Joseph Rago Fellow in 2019, to lead us in an invocation. So please refrain from eating your salads for a minute. Matthew King is serving his country today in the United States Navy. Matthew.
Good evening. Would you all please join me in a moment of prayer? Lord, we praise you for the opportunity to gather together this evening. We ask you to bless this food to our bodies, and we give thanks for everyone whose generosity and hard work made this meal possible. Lord, thank you for the blessings of freedom. On this Veterans Day, we pray for those who have served in uniform and for service members deployed far from home. Tonight, we also pray for journalists. O Lord, establish the work of their hands. Spread your wings over those journalists at risk of imprisonment, torture, or death simply for reporting the news. We pray for the day when the sham trial and the secret police will be no more. Finally, Lord, we ask for your continued blessings on our land. Grant our leaders wisdom, justice, and courage to carry out the work that you have given them to do. We also pray for the inbreaking of your kingdom in our lives. It's in your holy name we pray. Amen.
And we're going to offer a toast before we eat dinner as well. Some of you noticed I'm wearing a pin, which just popped off. It's the new William F. Buckley stamp, released by the post office on September 9th in New Haven, Connecticut. And not entirely coincidentally, I happen to be a member of the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee of the U.S. Postal Service. So I had a little something to do with this stamp, and I asked that you all go out and buy sheets of it at the Postal Service in the next few weeks. I see the sales statistics, and I know we're lagging behind the stamp of the dogs and the flowers and Betty Ford. So buy the William F. Buckley stamp. But because we're very close to what would have been his 100th birthday, we have his son here tonight, I thought it would be appropriate for Lindsay Craig, a strategic advisor and America 250 lead at the Fund for American Studies, who with Jack Fowler and others I know submitted the proposal that came to us at the Postal Service Committee to offer a toast. So Lindsay. Thank you. stuff and sit down.
Good. Okay. A toast to the late William F. Buckley Jr., founder of the conservative movement, who would have turned 100 later this month. We walk on paths blazed by those who came before us. Particular milestones along the way afford us opportunities to remember and to honor the pioneers. William F. Buckley Jr. sought to buttress the foundations of our free society and to preserve our inheritance from America's founders. He gathered the various factions of the intellectual right to find common ground and common cause, while importantly calling out those whose ideologies were fundamentally misaligned. Buckley's engaging personality, both on camera and at the podium, magnified his masterful use of the written word. This broadened his audience and those who were exposed to his ideas, galvanizing a purposeful new mission. An institution builder, a consistent mentor to the next generation, WFB inspired a political and cultural movement that changed the trajectory of American politics and bettered the lives of millions of Americans and those around the world. The movement lives on. And we can do more than just hope that his guiding spirit is still with us on our journey. It is our responsibility to preserve as well as promote the legacy of WFB so that he continues to inspire us. Please join me in a toast of gratitude to Mr. Buckley. May we here firmly resolve to honor his legacy by carrying on his mission. Cheers.
All right, thank you, everyone. That was a great toast. We're going to keep moving to the next part of our program. My name is Ryan Wolf. I am the director of the Center for Excellence in Journalism here at TFAS. And like Roger said, we have a lot of journalism programs that we work on here, starting on college campuses and continuing throughout the early careers of many journalists, but sort of our capstone program, and maybe one of the most important programs that we run here, is the Robert Novak Journalism Fellowship. So the Robert Novak Fellowship supports a rising group of serious and enterprising reporters, and it's a year-long project that they undertake on a particular topic, and it allows them to write these long-form essays, so 5,000 words every other month. That's 30,000 words. It's a lot of words to write. And they publish these projects often as a series of magazine articles or as books. And so this year, we're really excited to welcome the new group of fellows. Their projects are on topics as varied as Gen Z, mental health, industrial policy, and faith. If you can find a way to connect them all, maybe you too can get a Robert Novak Fellowship. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the 2025 class of Robert Novak Fellows, and they'll each give a little quick description of the work that they're doing and their projects they'll be undertaking this year. So let's welcome the fellows.
I would like to start out by thanking the Fund for American Studies for this opportunity and also for adjusting the mic. My name is Emma Camp. I'm an associate editor at Reason Magazine, where I cover culture, education, and civil liberties. My project, The Age of Loneliness, How Gen Z Became the Risk-Averse Generation, is a collection of reported essays examining how social risk aversion is driving young people's persistent loneliness and lack of meaning. It will also be published as a book, forthcoming with Ballantine Books in 2027. Gen Z is perhaps the most risk-averse generation on record. At first blush, There are obvious upsides. Youth drug and alcohol use have been declining for decades. The teen birth rate has quartered since the mid-90s. Fatal car accidents involving a teenage driver are down too. The downside, though, is that yes, there are these undeniably good changes, but they've come in tandem with steep declines in the kinds of emotional risk-taking required to mature into a thriving adult. Young people aren't drinking less because they're sipping soda instead of beer at high school parties. They're drinking less because there aren't any parties to go to. Gen Z is lonelier, more anxious, and more lost than any other generation in recent memory. Many young people are adrift, gripped by pervasive risk aversion and a cultural imperative to rely only on oneself. The prevailing culture, from the pages of literary novels to the annals of TikTok, often tell us that other people simply aren't worth the risks to our emotional well-being they incur. Instead, we need to protect our peace, cut out toxic people, and be skeptical of anyone who tries to get too close or know us too well. The tragedy of modern young adulthood is that we know how to be good, but we don't know how to be happy. We're so focused on exerting maximal caution that we've forgotten that caution also has risks. Understanding what it's like to be a 20-something in the 2020s means understanding this ascendant risk aversion and creeping loneliness that's gripping our culture. My project will be a guide through this maze, providing a dispatch from the depths of this lost, lonely, and internet-fueled Gen Z subculture from someone who's been there and back again. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Downey. I'm a columnist and video host at National Review. For my Novak project, A Cold War Between the Sexes, explaining the Gen Z partisan gap, I cover everything from the Obama administration Title IX sexual assault witch hunts on college campuses that stripped young men of due process rights, to the online ecosystem known as the manosphere and everything in between, whether that's the incel subculture or even groypers, and its application of stoicism to radical feminism's prevalence in pop culture. My goal as a Gen Z woman and as a triplet with two Gen Z brothers is to discover why young men and women are so far apart ideologically and the implications for our society, such as the youth romantic recession. There's a quip often attributed to Henry Kissinger, though he was probably not its originator, that nobody will ever win the battle of the sexes because there's just too much fraternizing with the enemy. It was a cynical statement at the time and a cynical sentiment, but it's actually turned out to be too optimistic. As young men and women separate into red and blue silos, it's not just the electoral math for both parties that becomes uncertain, but the creation of families and the continuation of our civilization. I'm immensely grateful to the Fund for American Studies for the opportunity to pursue this project. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jordan McGillis, and this is a testament to capitalism. This iPhone is the result of complex, specialized, and for the most part, uncoordinated human action conducted across continents and times. Capitalism delivers marvels of technology like this every day, and yet no society, no state has ever permitted capitalism to function in a completely free fashion. As a younger man, deeply under the sway of Ayn Rand, I lamented this tendency as a collectivist deviation from the reasoned path. I now view it as a fact of life. With the support of TFAS, my employer, the Economic Innovation Group, and Brian Anderson's City Journal, my project is going to interrogate how, as a commercial republic, we can pursue an efficient, industrial, capitalist economy amid the inevitable interactions of political economy and the distributional concerns from which it arises. Thank you very much.
Hello. My name is Timothy Nerozzi. I'm the Foreign Affairs correspondent for the Washington Examiner. I really like public speaking, but I always get nervous, so bear with me. First of all, I'm endlessly thankful to the Fund for American Studies, its donors, and its coordinators for giving me this opportunity. They've commissioned my project, which aims to explore one of the biggest questions that seems to be hovering on the edges of the American zeitgeist. Is there a religious revival happening in America? Or is Gen Z falling in love with God? Headline after headline in some of the nation's biggest publications, you'll read about celebrity conversion stories. You'll read about the way that Gen Z is believers and flocking into churches, flocking into synagogues. We're inundated with celebrity, sort of interviews, suddenly talking about their faith that for so long felt like it was supposed to be hidden. It seems like every church you go into is now suddenly filled with young parents, young families. It seems like something is going on. I found while researching this that the term religion and the term revival are very complex. And answering this question is going to be much more difficult than I ever anticipated, but that's quite exciting to think about. Does a revival mean an increase in self-professed religious belief? Or does it require an increase in participation? Does calling someone a Christian make them a Christian? Does calling oneself a Jew make them a Jew? Does saying that one believes in God make them religious? Maybe one of the most poignant case studies in this sort of very complex way of understanding what religion and revival could mean in America comes from the White House. Our non-denominational Protestant, non-church-going president who has recently honored the Feast of St. Michael and wished the Virgin Mary a happy birthday, all while contemplating the fate of his immortal soul. I've only begun to grasp the very strange contours of religion's trajectory in America. And it's truly stranger than I could have possibly imagined. And once again, thank you to the Fund for American Studies for helping with this. And I am going to continue my spiritual road trip into the heart of the American soul. Thank you and God bless.
I wouldn't call my project a spiritual road trip, but hopefully it'll be still pretty interesting. Hi everyone, my name is Valerie Pavlonis, and I'm the Ideas Editor of the Dispatch. My Novak project focuses on major questions within the topic of mental health in America, from the science behind antidepressants and whether those medications are actually safe, to the amount of despair expressed within our culture and whether we should seek to change that. It's very clear that mental health diagnoses are going up in this country. And while it would take more than a single person to isolate the exact cause of this, and in fact it would take actually an act of God, my goal with this project is to clear up some of the misconceptions and blind spots that we have about how the brain works, how the mind works, what are the best ways to nurture our minds in tandem with our bodies and our spirits. Some of those misconceptions involve definitions. There are many people working to change our perception of what depression and anxiety are in the first place. And some of those blind spots involve science. So, for example, how common psychiatric drugs actually work depends on who you ask, and in my own research I have found that we actually don't know how they work, and that's kind of worrying for drugs that maybe 10% of people are actually on. And it would be a mistake to think that within a year I can actually find the answer to all these questions. But I do think that this is a great opportunity that TFAS has given me, and I'm going to use it to just dig into this issue. And this issue is one that really has the potential to affect every one of us. And speaking just from numbers, it actually already does. So thank you.
Nothing is as fundamental to the human experience as birth. But Silicon Valley and other investors are hoping to change that, to reinvent reproduction. And I have questions. Good evening. My name is Caitlin Shelton, and I am a visiting fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center in Washington, D.C., where I research and write on issues of bioethics. What does it mean to be human? If we change something as fundamental as how we reproduce, how might that change humanity? Will pregnancy robots eventually supplant mothers, gestating their own children? Will embryo selection micromanaging our children down to their very DNA, affect the way we view them, change the way we treat them, or even change the way they think about us. That's what I'm investigating as a Robert Novak Journalism Fellow. Some fear we are witnessing the technological erasure of human nature. But not all applications of cutting-edge reproductive technologies are so dystopian. Consider, for example, Nicole Muldoon, who was told her son would be born with a fatal genetic condition. She didn't expect him to live more than a few weeks. But thanks to a new gene editing technology tailored specifically to her baby, doctors were able to cure baby KJ of his genetic condition. A few days after his birth, his parents expected to have a funeral, but now they're celebrating his birthdays. Technology isn't inherently bad. How we use it can be. Thank you for supporting the Novak Fellowship and giving me, a mom of 4 myself, the opportunity to explore the moral limits of reproductive biotechnologies, asking both what science can do for us and what it may do to us. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maya Solkin, and I am a reporter for the Free Press. Shout out to any Free Pressers in the room. The lack of cheers is forcing me to say the fp.com/subscribe. Okay. I get in trouble if I don't do that. When I was a sophomore at Columbia, I sent a cold email to Barry Weiss, who had recently started a little blog called Common Sense after leaving the New York Times. In that message, I detailed the kind of illiberalism and anti-Semitism I was seeing on campus, and my deep desire to be part of building something new, and frankly, to leave behind what I was experiencing. My goal really is to do what any good journalist ought to, which is to hold a mirror up to the world and show people what it actually is. I want to give people the tools to make informed choices about where to live, where to send their kids to school, what ideas and movements deserve their attention amidst their busy lives. Increasingly, I find those questions leading back to the same place, which is the university. The role of higher education in American public life has changed dramatically. The university is no longer a place for inquiry or truth-seeking, and we, the American public, will bear the brunt of that. The students we see on campus calling for the destruction of the West will be the next publishers, doctors, journalists, and lawyers. And yes, that should really scare you. That's why I'm really honored to be spending this next year reporting on why and how this rot permeated and how to fix it. My goal is to research and report this ideological evolution, specifically in the Ivy League, and explain how truth-seeking gave way to politics and investigate what it would take to fix those institutions. I'm grateful to the Fund for American Studies and to the Novak Fellowship for giving me the opportunity to report from campuses across the country and sharpen my understanding of one of the most important stories in American life. Thank you.
What a great class of fellows. Of course I would say that because I helped pick them. All right, please draw your attention to the screens. We have a quick little highlight video for you, and then enjoy your meal.
For our presentation of the Joseph Rago Memorial Fellowships for Excellence in Journalism, please welcome to the stage Paul Jagot, editorial page editor and vice president at the Wall Street Journal.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and all of you friends of journalism. I know all of you are here. It's a pleasure to be here, thanks to our hosts at the Fund for American Studies, Roger Ream and Ryan Wolf, who've been great partners with us over the years with the Rago Fellowship. Roger, I didn't know that you were on the Stamp Commission. Okay, so great job with Buckley. Now, Justice Scalia, please. This is one of my favorite evenings of the year because it reminds me that good journalism is not dead, as is commonly said. Reminds me that the very talented young men and women really do want to get into this business. Reminds me that artificial intelligence still has a ways to go before it replaces all of us in this business. And it reminds me that what we do really matters. So it's great to be here. Tonight we honor colleagues who've done great work over their long career, the great John Tierney and Mary O'Grady. Both have shown the courage to think for themselves over the years, and they aren't afraid to challenge the reigning orthodoxies. John Tierney did great work in the COVID pandemic era, highlighting the catastrophe of government policies. And it has been my pleasure over the years, in particular, to have Mary as a colleague whispering in my ears what the authentic free market position is on, well, just about everything. Okay, not always whispering. Want to say congratulations as well to the Novak Fellows. For those of you who are too young to remember Bob Novak, he was one of the great journalists of his era. I learned a great deal from reading his work every day. Woke up in fear every Friday morning because Bob's column, every Thursday morning, because I had to write for Friday and Bob's column was on Thursday. And as often as not, I go, geez, he beat me to it. He wrote an opinion column, but it was also a reported column, as I think all great opinion columns are. And to tell you one story about Bob, after the 2000 election, I was talking to a friend, this was in the first week or so after the election, about my friend Tim Muris, and he was saying, you know, the Democrats are going to try to steal this election. I was skeptical, naive, but Tim and I that evening happened to have seats next to Bob and Geraldine at the Wizards Arena, Washington Wizards. And when we arrived, Tim asked Bob what he thought about what was going on with the election, and Bob said, of course they're going to steal the election. Bob was always first on every story. I want to say congratulations to the Rago Fellowship winners, Susanna, Kate, and Cole. We are glad to have you as colleagues. I hope you know whose large footsteps you fill in Joe. Each year at this event, I like to read an excerpt from one of Joe's pieces, give you a flavor of his work and sensibility. He was a Dartmouth College graduate, and in one of his pieces in 2008, he uncorked the following under the headline, Dartmouth's Hostile Environment. Here's how it went. Even at, or especially at, putatively superior schools, students are spoiled for choice when it comes to professors who share liberal ideologies. The main result is to make coursework pathetically easy. Like filling in a Mad Libs, just patch something together about interrogating heteronormativity or whatever, and wait for the returns to start rolling in. This is Joe talking. I once wrote a term paper for a lit crit course where I deconstructed the MTV program Pimp My Ride. A typical passage of his essay, each episode is a text of inescapable complexity. Our received notions of what constitutes a ride are constantly subverted and undermined. It received an A. I know Joe would have loved writing about this particular era. I think he would have found the social media accounts of Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom particularly rich fodder. So we all miss Joe, but I think his legacy really does live on in the Rago Fellowship, which from my point of view has been a great success. Joe and Paul and Nancy came to us not long after Joe died and said, you know, we'd really like to see if we could create something that would give other young people the opportunity that Joe had. And so we worked with TFAS and put it together. And I'd like to think that we've given people that same opportunity. Certainly we at the Journal in return have gotten their great talents. We started with 1 fellow a year, then went to 2. And this year, 2 thanks to the generosity of Stephen Klinsky. And this year we have 3 thanks to Stephen and then my old friend from the Reagan years, Kathy Wendells. Thank you. Since 2018, we've had 11 Rago Fellows, if you can believe it. I've hired 3 of them. Would have hired more if I had a bigger budget. And I like to think we're even populating the competition, as former Rago Fellows can now be found working at other publications, which we like to refer to as Brand X. But this is a sacrifice we are willing to make for the good of the country. As we wrote when Jeff Bezos announced the editorial changes at the Washington Post, we are happy to have a wingman in the fight for free people and free markets. And my advice to readers is sample the competition, but always come back for the real thing. Thank you. The conventional wisdom these days is that journalism has descended into merely a partisan endeavor, an arm of one political party or another. Certainly there's much of that around, but I believe there's always going to be a role and I hope a market, an audience of readers for those journalists willing to examine the facts, as Joe did, and tell the truth about those facts. What all of you in journalism and all of you who help us do what we do has never been more important. In this time of, intellectual confusion, when so many of both parties are entertaining status solutions, don't seem to realize what they have traditionally stood for and should stand for. What you all do has never been more important. And I think I can speak for my colleagues at the Journal when I say, I don't think we've ever had more fun doing it. So my final task tonight, a very pleasant one, is to introduce Paul Rago. Paul has been a great partner with wife Nancy and Adam and Grace. So Paul, please come on up.
All right, welcome everybody. And thank you, Paul, for those kind and inspiring words about Joe. You inspired him as a role model, as a leader, and as a friend. And I thank all of you here tonight, for your commitment to honored excellence in journalism. The Fund for American Studies, the Wall Street Journal, Dartmouth alumni, vets, friends, and family. We certainly have much to celebrate, and we have much to be thankful for. I'll talk about that in a minute. But first, let me begin with Richard Weaver's famous quote and book by the same name, Ideas Have Consequences. Those of you who knew Joe personally would know that Joe might follow this up by saying, Dad, some ideas have consequences. But one idea that does have consequences is excellence in journalism. That's why we're here tonight. And journalism is serious business. Journalists who report with integrity, who are guided by facts, who stand on principles, and who think before they write are in short supply, outside of this room, of course. Rarer still is this ability to do this with wit and respect for the readers. Now, Simon and Garfunkel's song, Mrs. Robinson, ends with the line, Joltin' Joe has left and gone away. Joe has left, but he lives on in the memories and the hearts of his family, his friends, and his colleagues. And not a day goes by that we don't wonder, as Paul said, what Joe might have to say about a particular topic. Joe also lives on in the careers of the Rago Fellows. Well, let me explain. Our purpose is not to create Joe Ragos. Rather, we want to give them the same opportunities that Joe had and give those to others. We seek to identify highly qualified individuals of strong character with grit and the desire to pursue truth, no matter who's saying it. We want them in a demanding yet supportive environment of world-class colleagues. You couldn't ask for a better environment than the Wall Street Journal. And we want them to enjoy the journey. And I think that we, and by that I mean the leadership of TFAS, and Wall Street Journal, and all of you have succeeded in that mission. Now, they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So let me take a moment, or take a page out of Karl Rove's playbook. And talk a little bit about the fellowship. And Joe has in fact, Paul has already highlighted many of these things. We've had over 500 donations to date. The total donations exceed $2.4 million. There have been 278 unique donors, and especially unique, I'd like to I guess that's probably shouldn't be doing that in front of a bunch of journalisms. Unique needs no modifiers, right? But I would like to note that Stephen Klinsky has funded an individual last year and this year, and again, thank Kathy Wendell for her contributions to fund a Rago Fellowship this year. So from 2018 to 2023, the numbers are all up on the board. They don't look quite as good as these, but you know. But anyhow, but thanks. There are a total of 11, and 3 are currently on the staff. One is Elliot Kaufman, is a member of the editorial board. We celebrate that, and we celebrate 11 productive careers. So without further ado, let me introduce the 9th, 10th, and 11th recipients of the Rago Fellowship. They're a group of amazingly talented individuals, and although they are all recent graduates, their skill sets look like seasoned veterans. So Kate Farmer is a graduate of Washington University in St. Louis, where she majored in philosophy and data science. She's written for multiple media outlets, including Reason and the Washington Examiner, and she recently published an article in the Journal on the state of the Navy's shipbuilding program, or lack thereof. Suzanna Murawski has a master's degree in political theory and a bachelor's degree from the University of Chicago. And most recently, she was the Hilton Kramer Fellow at the New Criterion. And last but not least, Cole Murphy. He comes to us from Georgia Institute of Technology, where he received a degree in business administration. He worked for the Morning Dispatch. He was the editor-in-chief of Georgia Tech's student newspaper, and he served as a fellow at the College Fix. All of them are remarkably talented, and each of them will have an opportunity to introduce themselves in a moment. So let's give them all a big round of applause. You want to come up? No, well, I think this is the photo op section here.
I'm trying to be well.
There we go. There we go. So, yeah. So Nancy will come. You want to come on this side here? Yeah. Do you want the microphones in the way here? Okay, we'll go over this way. Oh, okay.
Come on up, ladies. Ladies, come up. Come on up. Cole, come on over here. Sure.
Great. I want to hide the canes.
Hi, I'm Kate Farmer. It's meaningful to stand here tonight to speak in memory of Joe Rago, since the first piece I ever wrote for an audience was also a memorial. I was 16, and it was a memorial I'd written for my former Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Lim. And in it, I reflected on how she taught me her important lessons about faith and life, not just through her words and lessons, but through her life's actions. And so as I thought about what to say for the second piece I've ever written for an audience, I reflected on how Joe, too, imparted to us some of his greatest wisdom, not just through words, of which he was a master, but through his life's actions. I'll give 3 examples. First, through his actions, Joe taught us integrity. It is a great loss that Joe never wrote a book, but a lesser-known fact is that he had the opportunity to, and he said no. Around the time Joe won the Pulitzer, he received a book deal on healthcare policy. But when the publisher insisted on making it a polemic Joe described as, quote, dripping with blood, he turned it down, even though publishing a book was a life dream. Second, Joe's actions taught us discipline. In the decade he was on the editorial page, Joe wrote over 1,300 unsigned editorials. When writing a profile on Trump in 2016, Joe read every book on the market about him, even every online review of Trump products, of which there were thousands. In Joe's small New York apartment were crammed hundreds of books stacked from floor to ceiling. It's often been wondered if Joe, in his relentless pursuit of knowledge, ever slept. And finally, Joe showed us the importance of treasuring and memorializing good words, one of my favorite qualities of his. Joe had a habit of keeping these 3x5 index cards where he'd jot down any great quotes or nuggets of wisdom that came by him his way. And after his passing, his friends found hundreds of them scattered across his desk and his office. And in the past 6 months, to follow Joe's example, I've done the same. And I have a quote here from Joe Rago himself. Admittedly, we don't carry 3x5 cards at the Journal. Joe encouraged journalists to not only tirelessly research their subjects, but to probe deeply into the ideas behind them. For, and I quote, "When ideas are understood in their own right, they are truer, more complex, and more interesting." I have one more here with me, and it's a quote actually from Henry James from one of Joe's own note cards. And it reads, "Produce again, produce better than ever, and all will be well." May all of the journalists in this room, those of us who are old and those of us who are very, very new, do the same for Joe. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Suzanna Murawski. I know we usually think of Joe Rago as a man of words, but I'll start by giving some numbers. 1,353. That's how many unsigned editorials he wrote for the Journal during his tenure. 4,000. That's how many books were in his personal library, tomes on healthcare, works of history, the novels he somehow managed to review on the side. 26,000. That's how many online reviews, as Kate mentioned, of Trump-branded products he waded through while reporting on the president-to-be. 28. That's how old he was when he won the Pulitzer Prize. The numbers don't lie. Joe Rago was exceptional. He was exceptional as a journalist and as a writer, as a mentor and as a friend. By all accounts, not least the evidence provided in his writing, he was brilliant, humble, funny, curious, and dogged, and I would be a fool if I wasn't daunted by the honor of carrying on his legacy. For that honor, I'd like to thank Roger Ream, Ryan Wolf, and the Fund for American Studies, whose leadership and support have changed many lives, not just my own. Thank you to my new colleagues at the Wall Street Journal, from whose example I'm learning every day. And thank you to Paul and Nancy Rago, whose magnanimity is truly inspiring. To that earlier list of numbers, I'll add another, 2. There are 2 components of genius, gift and choice. Joe had many gifts, intelligence, wit, facility with language, to name a few. But his choices are just as remarkable. As one friend put it, Joe was never just mouthing off. He was doing the hard work of real journalism. That hard work was a choice, the sum of many choices. Reading widely and deeply, doing the scut work, rigor in argument, care for the craft of writing. You can't pick the gifts you get. None of us can wish ourselves into having that special combination that Joe did. Where we can follow his example is in our choices. We can do as he implored, go beyond mere opinion, produce journalism that is, as he wrote, specific, tangible, and usually subtle, and that considers the particulars in their richness, complexity, and contingency. These are not easy things to do or to do well. To follow Joe in his choices, to try and live up to his legacy, is a duty for any writer worth his or her salt, and it is also a challenge. I'm honored to be faced with that challenge, and I thank you for the opportunity to try.
My name is Cole Murphy. Thank you so much for the privilege to speak in front of you all. Tonight, once again, reminds us of the magnificent journalist that Joe Rago was. As Susanna said, Joe, by the numbers, is remarkable. I'm not the only one in this room who reads Joe's pieces before I start writing. No one displayed his clarity and command of the language. In the midst of the Obamacare fight, PolitiFact decided that its lie of the year was the phrase, "a government takeover of healthcare." A good journalist could critique the assertion. A great one, Joe, could dismantle it in 4 words. Ordinarily, he wrote, lies need verbs. But journalism doesn't have a long shelf life. News can render stories outdated 2 minutes after they're published. And after a few years, even the stories we're most proud of slip into irrelevance. Yet every year we stand up here and remember Joe, because his legacy isn't just his skill and his commentary. We remember Joe because of his heart. His humility and exceptional character jump off the page in everything he wrote. He wasn't just writing for the people in this room. He was writing for people like my grandparents, the kinds of people who read the journal's opinion page loyally to understand their world. Joe never condescended, and he made the complex accessible. For Joe, the truth was not for a certain class. It was for everyone. It's easy to fall into despair about the state of the country, and plenty of journalists are willing to give us a push. But Joe wouldn't. One of his life's goals, as Kate highlighted, was to write a book, but he didn't because he refused to write something dripping with blood. He refused to traffic in fear or contempt. He cared about people too much for that. He knew what really mattered. On this stage last year, Paul said that he wondered what Joe would say about this political moment. Paul said Joe would advise everyone to relax and focus on what really matters, your families and friends. Joe understood that people matter more than politics. Anyone who's read his work knows this is true. Just look at his humor. It did far more than just make his writing entertaining. It was a glimmer of light amidst a darkening political world. It invited people to laugh, because if they did, darkness, hurt, and sadness didn't win. You left Joe's work with more understanding of the world, with less fear of it. What Joe did for his readers was an act of love. It's what allowed Joe to see people not as an audience, but as individuals. It's the love that led him to give a Christmas card to the employees at his laundromat. It's the love that allowed him to be, as it was put in the pages of the journal, more interested in others than himself. All of us, journalist or not, writer or not, who recognize the power of Joe's character and how rare people like Joe are, have a responsibility to carry on his work. For our friends, families, colleagues, and neighbors, we can show love, fight despair, and impart hope. One news story won't stand the test of time, but selflessness like Joe's lasts long after we're gone. Thank you all so much, and I want to especially thank Paul and Nancy. Your generosity is such a blessing, and I'm so grateful for your kindness and encouragement. Thank you to Ryan Wolf and Roger Ream at the Fund for American Studies, and thank you to Paul Jagot, James Toronto, Matt Hennessy, and all the editors who have taken a chance on me. I really appreciate your trust, guidance, and support. Thank you.
For our presentation of the Thomas L. Phillips Career Achievement Award, please welcome to the stage Daniel Henninger of the Wall Street Journal.
I am, of course, more than pleased to present the Fund's Thomas L. Friedman Career Achievement Award to my Wall Street Journal colleague, Mary O'Grady, or as she is known to her readers, Mary Anastasia O'Grady. A memorable byline never hurts. Mary's assignment through the years has been the singular title of her column, The Americas. I'll return to the singularity of it in a moment. Mary's beat, The Americas, consists of some 33 countries containing more than 1 billion citizens. How she got the job of covering a billion-person beat is worth telling. She was being interviewed for the job by our page's then editorial page editor, Bob Bartley. She had never worked for a newspaper before. Bob explained to Mary that we were a daily newspaper with deadlines. And so Bob asked, "Do you think you'll be able to handle the pressure?" Mary's reply, "I've been an options trader for Merrill Lynch. Does that answer your question?" I know this story because Bob told it to me. What he loved about it was that it captured the O'Grady persona. Don't be shy, always cut to the chase. In a word, blunt, but in a nice way. We've been colleagues at the Journal for a long time, and to this day I remain amazed at Mary's intense interest in the well-being of the citizens of the country she covers and the depth of her knowledge about each one of them. You might say to her, "Isn't it something that Colombia's appeals court overturned the conviction of former President Alvaro Uribe?" And always, Mary is way ahead of you. She will already have talked to 3 sources in Colombia, and you will get the reasons why in great factual detail. Throw a dart at a map of the Americas, and Mary can tell you what's happening there right now. Which brings me back to the singularity. Mary's sourcing is so good in the Americas because so few writers in the mainstream US media make an effort to talk to them. And in the case of the country's conservatives, nobody else talks to them. Through her own energy, Mary has been on the speed dial to a continent of potential national presidents, foreign ministers, and finance ministers, and most of all, opposition dissidents. Maria Corina Machado went into hiding in Venezuela after Maduro stole the election in the summer of 2024. In short order, she was on the phone to, yes, of course, Mary O'Grady. I'm not going to say that Mary got Machado the Nobel Peace Prize, but I will say that with her writing, Mary put Maria Machado in front of the world before anyone else cared about her or the Venezuelan opposition. I have a few other O'Grady favorites worth mentioning, which I think will reveal why this evening is happening. The ladies in white. Mary has devoted many columns to the women in Havana, wives and mothers of imprisoned men, who would march after Sunday Mass in defiance of Castro's threats and thugs, often at the risk of being beaten. When Barack Obama infamously visited Cuba in 2016, Mary covered it from here because she is banned from going there. As she recently told me, people sometimes ask her, "Are you Cuban?" Argentina's big money problems were in the news recently, and Mary's been there and done that, and been attacked for being, well, blunt about Argentina's politics. In 2005, after the Buenos Aires daily La Nación reprinted Mary's column that week, the government's Peronist foreign minister responded by lodging the ultimate insult at Mary O'Grady. He accused her of neoliberalismo. Neoliberalism. Which brings us to why this award matters so much tonight. For all the superb reporting, for all the great sources, Mary's, since the day she began writing The Americas, has done so inside a set of values that never wavers, that is never absent from her columns. It's a belief in the rule of law, belief in free markets, and belief in the ability of individuals to determine their own fortunes through free elections. In a word, and to be blunt about it, liberty. So let us present the much-deserved Phillips Lifetime Achievement Award to the lady from the Americas, Mary Anastasia O'Grady. You're on.
Wow. Well, thank you, Dan, for that really generous introduction. If only I knew what Hugo Chavez would do for my career. It's amazing how many of those battles and entanglements one forgets over 30 years of doing journalism. I forget the entanglements, but never the grudges. To receive a recognition like this is deeply gratifying, but to receive it from the Fund for American Studies this evening as we honor the memory of Joe Rago and Robert Novak is especially meaningful. I was so lucky to know Joe. He was the rare combination of brainy intellectual and your totally down-to-earth next-door neighbor. I've never stopped missing his incisive writing on our pages. From the way he could unpack our Byzantine healthcare system to his witty observations about Ivanka Trump's flammable scarves. The work of TFAS in educating Americans about our history, institutions, and ideals is invaluable in this country today. I think it was the constitutional scholar Randy Barnett who said that freedom is never fully won, but it can be fully lost. In my view, as long as TFAS is around, that's not about to happen in this country. Now, I've been asked to say a few words about how I got here, and I'd like to do that, except I'm really not too sure myself. I do know that fortune smiled on me when George Malone and Robert Bartley hired me in 1995. I reported to George for more than a decade, and it was the best thing that happened to me in journalism. What he taught me prepared me for collaborations with my colleagues for decades to come. I wish he could be here this evening. I've also been lucky because I fell in love with my subject, and that's made my job as a journalist more of a vocation than work. Foreign countries have never seemed foreign to me, maybe because the journal opens doors. Paul Berman, a journalist, I would say of the left, sort of, wrote a great piece in the New Yorker magazine in 1996 where he complained that gringo journalists in Nicaragua during the Contras counter-revolution sat in big hotels in Managua and circulated the same cliches with each other rather than going up into the highlands to see for themselves what the war was about. I've been lucky to be able to do real reporting in places as diverse as a submarine base in Ushuaia, Argentina, the desperately poor neighborhood of El Cerro in Havana, the Andes high above Cochabamba, a very rundown hotel that was once a very glorious hotel in Cap Haitian, in places like Atacama and Oaxaca, and many places in between. And everywhere, in all of those places, I've met with a longing for liberty that matches my own, even in Canada. Everywhere, I've met courageous individuals, many of whom gave up everything for the fight for freedom. There are many more of them than you would think, but most of them have no voice, so you don't hear about them. It's been my privilege to tell their stories. In many ways, succeeding in journalism is no different than any other line of work. It takes curiosity, tenacity, and yes, humility. Believe it or not, if you have those three things, you're way ahead of the competition. When I joined the Journal in August 1995, the Western Hemisphere was enjoying a spurt of optimism. Mexico had emerged from the tequila crisis, and NAFTA had survived. Argentina had adopted convertibility at 1-to-1 to the dollar. Chile and Brazil had returned to democracy. Peru had defeated the Shining Path, and Fujimori was opening the economy. But in the last 20 years, rather than push ahead, we've lost so much ground. And it can be discouraging. Socialism is so stupid. And when I read and when I read about Zoran Mandami, I roll my eyes and think, do we really have to do this again? The answer is yes. God made man to be free, but humans have always had a different idea. Threats to living in a free and just society will always be with us. And that's why we need you. Even when you're not winning, remember, young journalists, you're keeping a record, and that matters. And when things get really bad, just remember that when it comes to building Republican institutions, the first 500 years are the toughest. Thanks again to TFAS for this award, and to all of you for holding high the torch of liberty.
For the presentation of the Kenneth Y. Tomlinson Award for Courageous Journalism, please welcome to the stage author Christopher Buckley.
Good evening. Our honoree tonight, John Tierney, is my great friend. If this doesn't speak well for his taste in company, I think it does mine. John and I began a conversation 52 years ago on the corner of Elm and High Streets in New Haven. It's still going. Now, I get the impression that TFAS is a conservative organization. Well, in the interests of full disclosure, I feel that you should know that in those days, John's politics were, I don't want to say Marxist, Leninist. As the French say, a man who is not a socialist at 20 has no heart, while a man who is still a socialist at 20 has no head. And as we now know, a man who's not a socialist at 20 better start if he's going to get elected mayor of New York at 34. John is in his 70s now, with both organs robustly intact. He has a heart of gold and a head that makes my own spin in awe. But enough about him. Let's talk about me. I accepted this invitation to introduce John tonight with some trepidation. You see, a quarter century ago, his then employer, the New York Times, nominated John for a Pulitzer Prize. For reasons that escape me still, the Times asked me to write the nominating letter, extolling John's virtues. I fell to my task with the zeal of a modern-day Horace, My letter was a dithyramb-rich ode to make any Pulitzer jury swoon. And the result, wait for it, John did not get the Pulitzer. So when I was asked to speak on his behalf tonight, I called him and said, "Are you sure? My task record at putting you on pedestals is a little spotty." "They've already announced the award," he said. "It's too late for you to screw it up." So here goes. John is one of the outstanding journalists of our generation, and one of the most fearless. Tonight's award is richly deserved. He's also one of the most seasoned newspapermen of his generation. There is barely a paper or publication he has not written for. The Yale Daily News, Pravda, that was in the Leninist period. He didn't last long. He was fired for exhibiting Trotskyist tendencies. The New Haven Register, the Pittsburgh Press, the Philadelphia Bulletin, Minneapolis Tribune, Bergen Record, Washington Star, Science 80, 81, 82, the New York Times, and now the Manhattan Institute's excellent City Journal. Not shabby. His books have been translated into 20 languages. Yes, including English. He has reported from all 7 continents. He has followed Joseph Conrad up the Congo River into the heart of darkness and dog-sledded across the Arctic waste. One day in 2003, he phoned me from Baghdad. In the background, I could hear sirens, explosions, and the whop, whop, whop of Black Hawk helicopters. "I interviewed someone today in a mosque," he said. "It was 122 degrees. Braver still was his contrarian reporting for the New York Times, the very belly of the woke beast, where he serially slaughtered one sacred PC cow after another. Recycling, climate change, overpopulation. When Hillary Clinton and Rosie O'Donnell denounced Mayor Giuliani for not allowing homeless people to camp on the sidewalks of New York, John put on his grubbiest clothes, drove to the leafy suburbs where Ms. Clinton and Ms. O'Donnell dwelt behind iron gates and security cameras, and camped on their sidewalks. The Westchester SWAT team swiftly arrived and hauled him off. Mrs. Clinton and Ms. O'Donnell did not respond to requests for comment. I have been present, ladies and gentlemen, I have been present on numerous occasions when John's contrarian views, always supported by science and cold, hard, inconvenient facts, have reduced bien-pensant mandarins to spluttering, incoherent indignation, and mightily entertaining it was. John's people came over from Ireland. In this, he sometimes reminds me of another contrarian-minded Irishman, Dean Swift. I can well imagine an 18th century John Tierney in Dublin penning sly, subversive, modest proposals, suggesting that the poor sell their infants to the rich as food. The Gaelic has a term, as it does for so many lovely things. Anam Cara, soul friend. John and I have been laughing or as one observer put it, honking and snorting, for over a half century since that day we found each other on the street corner in New Haven. We're no longer the lads we once were, but when we laugh, we grow young again. His friendship has been one of my life's greatest blessings and delight. And so, without further ado or ceremony, please welcome this year's winner of the Pulitzer Prize. I'm sorry, the Tomlinson Award, John Tierney.
Thank you, Anam Kara, for that and for many other laughs through the decades. Thank you. Thank you, Roger, and thank you everyone at TFAS for the Tomlinson Award. I'm thrilled by it. I'm deeply grateful. I've been a longtime admirer of Ken Tomlinson, both for his journalism career and for the legacy here at TFAS. It's always, the most inspiring evening of the year for journalists to see how much support TFAS is giving to young journalists, and it's wonderful to see the work they're doing. And they're already doing great work, but I want to very briefly just pass on a couple of lessons that have helped me in my career. I didn't, as Chris noted, I didn't have the benefit of TFAS's education when I was in college. I actually went door to door campaigning for George McGovern, and I apologize for that. But eventually, by going into journalism, I began to see this gap between what I thought, what I'd been told, and how the world worked. And so along the way, it took me a while, but I gradually learned something that I later summarized in my blog at the New York Times. At the top of this blog were the two founding principles. Just because an idea appeals to a lot of people doesn't mean it's wrong, but that's a good working theory. And I also noticed that one of the most appealing ideas, especially to journalists, was be afraid, be very, very afraid. There was just one crisis after another. The population crisis, there was the energy crisis, the recycling crisis, the climate crisis, now the democracy crisis. It just never stopped. And I came to see this really as the worst problem not only in journalism, but in politics, because it's that relentless crisis mongering that feeds the growth of the government. And so I call this the crisis. I think it's the one real crisis that's there. And so whenever I hear about the latest apocalypse that we have to fear, I remind myself of three things. First, the world will always be in crisis. Second, the crisis is never as bad as it sounds. Third, the solution will probably make things worse. Now, it's always going to be a problem because journalists love scare stories, and there's a whole industry of activists and academics, politicians, and bureaucrats happy to give them scary quotes because it's very profitable, these crises. But fortunately, there's a growing number of skeptics, of crisis debunkers, thanks to the work of TFAS and other groups. One of my favorites is a TFAS senior scholar, Don Boudreau, the economist. I've been benefiting for decades from his expertise, and I'm very grateful to him for that, and to TFAS for supporting him. I'm also grateful to the editors of mine who were willing along the way to publish challenges to conventional wisdom at science magazines, at the New York Times. Yes, there were a few there, actually, at one time. And at the Wall Street Journal and at the New York Post. And most of all, I'm grateful to my colleagues at the Manhattan Institute, to Larry Mohn, the president who hired me, to Raihan Salam, the current president, to Brian Anderson, who's here tonight, the editor of City Journal, the brilliant editor, and to Paul Beston, the managing editor. They have been an absolute joy to work with, and the best thing of all is they're utterly fearless, and never more so during COVID. They encouraged me early in the pandemic and a dozen other writers at City Journal to challenge COVID dogma and to just keep challenging it relentlessly. Now, there were a few other skeptics, notably at the Wall Street Journal and at the New York Post, but most editors across the political spectrum just stuck to that COVID dogma. They kept endorsing these unprecedented infringements on liberty. And I mean, I've been writing about this sort of crisis mongering for all my life, and I was still astonished at how bad it was. I mean, it was the worst fiasco I've ever seen in journalism. I think it was the worst public policy mistake ever made in peacetime. But there was one silver lining, and I want to end on an optimistic note for our younger journalists. The one silver lining was that the crisis mongering went on so long and was so absurd that much of the public stopped paying attention. And they saw how bad the legacy media had gotten, and they turned to new sources of information. And that's good news for the new generation of journalists, because you have more opportunities, more outlets than ever to reach the public and to challenge conventional wisdom. Now, of course, when you do that, you'll get a lot of pushback, a lot of grief. The old guard's not going easily. But don't let that deter you. Keep in mind, and this is my final piece of advice for the evening, keep in mind what Tom Wolfe said when his daughter showed him a vicious review of his book. She was upset at it, and she said, "How can you stand this? It's so horrible. How can you put up with this?" And he just smiled, and he laughed, and he said, "You're nobody until somebody hates you." So, thank you. So my final words are, go forth and make enemies. Thank you.
Before we all leave, just a couple of quick things. We do this dinner and we honor Mary Anastasia O'Grady and John Tierney because of the great journalism they do, but also because it funds the Joseph Rago and Robert Novak Fellowships. So thank you to both of you for contributing to these programs that are so vital for the young journalists, and honoring you tonight helps us raise money to do that. Thank you. Thank you also to Christopher Buckley and Dan Henninger for your wonderful presentations. The expectations I had coming in tonight were far exceeded by the actual dinner. So the young people are so inspiring, and the words of our honorees and the presenters were great. I do want to mention with us tonight are some previous winners of awards at the TFAS Journalism Dinner: James Bennett of The Economist, Bill McGurn of the Wall Street Journal, and Brian Anderson of the City Journal. And in earlier renditions of this, I know both Dan Henninger and Paul Gigot were honored at our journalism dinners, I think under Tom Phillips' leadership. And then finally, I thought it would be interesting to just ask the people here who personally knew Joe Rago, either from Dartmouth, family, friends, anyone who knew Joe Rago, please stand so we can see your participation here tonight, including the family. Well, thank you very much. If you aren't a supporter of this program and you're inspired to do so, we have a QR code on the screen. I'll give you a minute to put your cameras up, but thank you so much for coming tonight. We'll see you again in a year. Good night.